12 names. That is where this begins. 12 names carried across the centuries, from a dry desert camp to the gleam of an eternal city. You have heard them since childhood, maybe. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, the roll call of a people. But here is the question that quietly haunts the list. Why does the same number appear again at the apostles and again at the gates of heaven? Why 12 and not 11 or 13 or around 10? The answer is not a coincidence. The pattern is a thread, and once you pull it, the whole tapestry begins to move. Stay with me, because what we are about to trace is not a numerology parlor trick. It is a structural signature, a divine fingerprint pressed into the clay of history, into the very walls of the New Jerusalem. You are not just hearing old stories, you are being shown a blueprint that connects the first book of the Bible to the last. Feel the weight of that claim for a moment, a pattern that spans the entire biblical narrative, from the family tent of a wandering patriarch to the foundations of the holy city. That is the mystery we are going to unravel today, layer by layer, evidence by evidence. The first layer is the ground itself, the 12 tribes of Israel, born from the 12 sons of Jacob. We need to begin with the dust and the sand, with the physical reality of that ancient camp, because the number 12 was never an abstract idea to the people of Israel. It was written into their very bloodstream, into the census lists, into the arrangement of their tents around the sanctuary, into the stones that rested on the high priest's heart. This was not a random tally. It was the architecture of their entire identity. You might have read the genealogies in Genesis and skimmed past the names, treating them as a tedious prelude to the real story. But here is what changes everything. Those 12 sons were not just characters in a family drama. They became the 12 tribes, 12 distinct peoples, each with its own banner, its own territory, its own place in the camp of God. And the moment you see the layout, the intent behind the number snaps into focus. Picture the Israelite encampment in the wilderness, the very air thick with the smell of livestock and wood smoke, the sound of 1,000 tents flapping in the desert wind. At the center stood the tabernacle, the dwelling place of God, and surrounding it, in a carefully ordered square, were the 12 tribes. 3 on the east, 3 on the west, 3 on the south, 3 on the north. 4 sides, 12 tribes, 1 sanctuary at the heart of it all. It is a pattern of complete enclosure, of total coverage, as if the number 12 was the only number sufficient to surround the presence of God. Now look closer at the high priest, the one figure allowed to draw near. On his breastplate rested 12 stones, each one engraved with the name of a tribe. Exodus 28 verses 15 through 21, the stones of sardius, topaz, and carbuncle, set in gold, arranged in 4 rows of 3. The weight of that breastplate was the weight of the whole people, carried over the priest's heart as he stood before the altar. You can almost feel the cool, polished surface of those stones against the palm of your hand, each one smooth, heavy, and inscribed with a name that represented thousands of lives. This is the first grip of the pattern. God binds his people to himself in a structure of 12, physically, visibly, and the census in Numbers chapter 1 makes the same point. When Moses and Aaron counted the fighting men, tribe by tribe, the total assembled into a nation. The list is painstaking, almost obsessive in its detail, because the 12-fold structure was the very shape of their covenant identity. Even when the tribes shifted, Levi set apart for priestly service, Joseph splitting into Ephraim and Manasseh, the count still returned to 12. It is a remarkable resilience. Take away one tribe for sacred duty, and the structure adjusts, folds, and still lands on the same sacred number. The pattern was so deeply woven into the national psyche that it survived every reshuffling the text records. So here is the first layer of our answer. 12 is the number of God's people. organized under his rule, encircling his presence. It speaks of divine government and a completeness that human arithmetic cannot quite explain. But just as your mind settles into this Old Testament frame, something happens that should unsettle you. The pattern refuses to stay in the past. We are going to leave the desert camp and its banners, the weight of the breastplate stones, and step into the dusty roads of Galilee, because a man named Jesus, walking with a small group of followers, is about to do something that would have been unmistakable to anyone who knew the scriptures. He is going to choose 12 men, and the echo of the tribes is deafening. Do you see what is happening? The pattern is not finished. It is moving, growing, and pointing somewhere you have not yet looked. Matthew chapter 10, verses 2 through 4, gives us the list of the 12 apostles: Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother, James and John, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew, and so on. But the names alone do not tell you the weight of the choice. In the ancient world, the number of disciples a teacher gathered was a statement. 12 was not arbitrary. It was a claim. Jesus was deliberately reconstituting Israel. The 12 apostles were not just a leadership team. They were the foundation of a new people, a renewed covenant community, and the Gospels do not let you miss it. Luke chapter 22, verse 30, quotes Jesus saying the apostles will sit on thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. He is mapping the new movement directly onto the ancient structure. Then comes the jarring moment that proves the apostolic number was not a loose preference. After the betrayal of Judas, the remaining 11 are in the upper room, and they feel the absence as a rupture. Acts chapter 1, verses 15 through 26, records the solution. They cast lots to choose a replacement Matthias so that the number returns to 12. It was not enough to have 11 loyal men. The 12-fold structure was non-negotiable. It was sacred geometry, not logistics, an unbroken pattern reaching back across 1,000 years of covenant. If you want to keep tracing these threads with me, subscribe so you don't miss what surfaces next. And in the comments, I want you to write one word: restored, because that is the gesture the apostles made. Not replacement, but restoration of a design that was never meant to be broken. Think about that for a second. They could have simply continued with 11. No one would have blamed them for shrinking the team. But the apostles understood that the pattern carried meaning, that their number was not about management efficiency, but about continuity with the ancient promise. They were not replacing a lost friend, they were restoring a sacred symmetry. And here is the detail that often goes unmentioned. These 12 were not a collection of elites. They were fishermen, a tax collector, a zealot, men with rough hands and loud voices, yet they were being built into the foundation of something eternal. The New Testament writer Paul picks up this language in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 20, describing the household of God as being built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets. The imagery is architectural, physical, tactile. You can almost see the stones being laid, one by one, each apostle a cornerstone in a structure that was still being raised. The tribes were the people of God in the wilderness. The apostles were the foundation of the people of God in the age of the church. Same number, same God, same pattern. But the thread does not end with the apostles, and this is where the mystery deepens. Because the New Testament does not just echo the 12-fold structure in the present, it projects it into the future, into the very shape of eternity. You might think the pattern would dissolve in the glorious chaos of heaven, that the specific structures of the Old Covenant would melt away into unmediated presence. But that is not what the text shows. Revelation chapter 21 reveals a city, the New Jerusalem, descending from heaven. And the first thing John notices about the walls, 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels, and on the gates the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. Let that image settle. The eternal dwelling place of God, the city of pure gold and jasper, is not a formless void of light. It is a city with gates, named gates, ordered gates, 12 of them. And then verse 14 gives the second half of the mystery. The wall of the city has 12 foundations, and on them are the 12 names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb, the tribes and the apostles, fused into a single eternal structure. What began with the 12 sons of Jacob concludes with the 12 gates of glory. The pattern is not incidental decoration, it is the very skeleton of redemption. Both covenants, both peoples, one city. Stand with me in that vision for a moment. You are standing before the eastern side of the wall, and the gate before you is a single enormous pearl, glowing with a light that seems to come from within. You can hear the hum of the city, the sound of many voices, and you can see the angels standing watch. The names are engraved, not painted, not stamped, but carved into the living substance of the gate itself. Each gate is named for a tribe. Each foundation is named for an apostle. And this is not a random distribution. It is a deliberate joining of the old and the new, the promise and the fulfillment. The God who gathered 12 tribes in the wilderness is the same God who sent 12 apostles to the nations, and he is preparing a city where both are honored together. The measurement of that city, given in Revelation 21, verse 16, is 12,000 furlongs, a perfect cube. 12,000, the number 12, amplified to a cosmic scale. The cube itself, equal on all sides, is the ancient symbol of perfection, of the Holy of Holies. But even the Holy of Holies in the temple was built to specific dimensions, a perfect cube. The New Jerusalem is that Holy of Holies blown up to the size of a city, filled with the people of God. Now pause and look back at the path we have walked. From the 12 stones on the high priest's breastplate, to the 12 apostles on their thrones, to the 12 gates and foundations of the eternal city. The pattern is not confined to one era, one book, one covenant. It spans the whole of Scripture. But as you sit with this evidence, a question rises that demands an answer. What does the number itself mean? Why does God consistently reach for 12 again and again, across thousands of years, across every genre of biblical writing? Is there a deeper significance hiding behind the arithmetic? We have seen the pattern. Now we must understand the purpose. Here is the insight that ties it all together. In the ancient world, 12 was a number of government and order, but it was also a number of completeness. Consider the 12 months of the year, the 12 hours of the day, a division of time so old that even neighboring cultures across the ancient Near East measured by it. The number 12 in that world was shorthand for the fullness of time, the totality of a system. But Scripture takes that common cultural understanding and sanctifies it. When God chooses 12 tribes, he is not copying a pagan pattern. He is claiming that pattern as a means to reveal himself. The people of God, organized into 12, become a sign to the nations, a visible demonstration of divine order in a chaotic world. The pattern is not about magic, it is about meaning. Think of the 12 spies sent into Canaan, recorded in Numbers chapter 13. 12 men, one from each tribe, sent to scout the promised land. The mission itself was a corporate act, the whole nation represented in the 12. Even when the spies returned with a divided report, 10 fearful, 2 faithful, the structure held. The pattern persisted, even in the failure. The 12 spies went out, and even when 10 of them brought back fear, the pattern didn't break. God's order holds. If you're seeing this thread now, subscribe so you don't miss where it leads. Then leave a comment with the word persisted and tell us, where have you seen God's pattern endure in a moment that seemed like failure? Or consider the 12 stones taken from the middle of the Jordan River in Joshua chapter 4. 12 stones, one for each tribe, set up as a permanent memorial on the western bank. The text says these stones will be a sign among the people, so that when their children ask what they mean, they will tell the story. Physical, heavy, uncut stones stacked as a witness. 12 again. And there were 12 loaves of showbread placed fresh each week inside the sanctuary, representing the 12 tribes before God. Leviticus chapter 24, verse 5, describes the arrangement. Fine flour baked into 12 cakes, set in 2 rows of 6. Bread and stone and census, all bearing the same number. The pattern is relentless. It is stamped into the ritual, the history, the geography of the biblical world. And this is where the ache begins to surface. Have you ever felt that Scripture is a collection of disconnected stories, fragments without a unifying thread? You read the genealogies, you skim the laws, you hear the prophecies, and it all feels scattered, like pieces of a puzzle you will never assemble. The number 12 is one of the hidden joints that reveals the assembly. It is the recurring signature that shows you the same hand is writing through every era. Not a forger, not a random editor, but one author with one design. The ache of fragmentation dissolves when you start to see the structural continuity. The stories are not a jumble, they are a construction. Now comes the moment of personal confrontation, and if you feel a flicker of resistance, that is a good sign. Because the pattern of 12 is not just a fascinating artifact to admire from a distance. It is a claim being made on your own life. The New Testament does not leave you as a spectator to the 12. It tells you that you are being built into the same structure. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 5 is startlingly direct. You yourselves, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house. The same architectural imagery used for the foundation of the apostles is applied to you. You are not a stone lying at the edge of the construction site. You are in the wall. This is the deeper layer of the mystery. The 12 is not a closed club, a finished number admitting no members. It is a complete foundation upon which the rest of the building rises. The tribes were the beginning. The apostles established the framework, but the building is still going up. And you are part of it, stone by stone. Faith is not a private, disconnected feeling. It is a position in a structure. The God who arranged 12 tribes around his sanctuary in the wilderness is the same God who is arranging you right now in relation to his presence. You are not drifting without a place. You are set into a wall that has been standing for millennia. Feel the weight of that stone in your own spiritual hands, its coolness, its roughness, its permanence. The story of 12 is the story of belonging. You have a specific named place in the divine construction, known and engraved long before you felt it. The pattern is not a curiosity. It is a map of your own location. And now we come to the unveiling, the point where the pattern stops being a series of historical observations and becomes a single luminous reality. Instances of 12 across Scripture, the tribes, the apostles, the gates, the stones, they are not merely repeated for artistic effect. They are converging on a single point of meaning, the full, ordered, governed people of God dwelling eternally with him. In the New Jerusalem, the tribes are on the gates and the apostles are on the foundations. The same people, the same promise, the same number. It is a picture of perfect harmony. No tribe missing, no foundation absent, the whole structure complete. The 12 is the number of the final reality that every earlier 12 was pointing toward. You cannot leave this vision and go back to reading the census lists as dry records, because what you have seen is that the God of the Bible is a God of design. Not random, not arbitrary, but intentional, layered, and overwhelmingly consistent. The number 12 is one of his signatures written across the fabric of Scripture so that the attentive eye might see his hand at work in every age. And the pattern is whispering to you now. In this very moment, it is saying that if God is this careful, with the structure of tribes and apostles and gates, then he is equally careful with the structure of your own life. Nothing about your placement in his story is accidental. You are a named stone in a building he has been constructing since the days of Jacob. The ache of a faith that feels fragmented, the frustration of reading a Bible that seems disconnected from your daily existence. The 12 is the answer that heals both. The thread that runs through every tribe, every apostle, every gate is the same thread that runs through your own story, weaving it into the larger tapestry. You are not outside the pattern, you are the reason the pattern exists. So look once more at the gates of that city, the enormous pearls glowing with undisturbed brilliance. Watch the light pour through the eastern gate, the one named for Judah, and hear it echo off the walls of jasper and gold. The 12 foundations beneath your feet bear names you have come to know, and the whole structure is one great testimony to the faithfulness of God. The 12 gates and foundations stand as a testimony to the faithfulness of God, and you are now woven into that same design. If you want to continue uncovering these sacred patterns, subscribe and let's trace the next thread together. In the comments, share the single word that rose in you as we stood before those gates. For me, it was faithfulness. What was yours? That is the mystery of the 12, traced from the dust of the desert to the gates of glory. The sand that covered the camp is long gone, scattered by wind and time, but the structure it held has not collapsed. It has only been translated, carried from the wilderness to eternity, from shadow to substance. The 12 stones that weighed on the high priest's chest became the 12 foundations of a city that cannot be shaken. The continuity is the message. You have walked the full span now from a patriarch's tent to a city of light. And in that walk, something has shifted in how you read. The Bible is no longer a shelf of separate books, but a single building with one footprint. Every tribe, every apostle, every gate, every stone fits into an architecture that was drawn before the first stone was laid. The mystery resolves not into a formula, but into a face. The 12 points not to a principle, but to a person who holds all things together. And in that person, your own scattered days, your fragmented efforts, your unquiet heart are being gathered into a structure that stands. The pattern was never about numbers. It was about belonging, finished and forever. So let the last image be this: a gate wide open and light spilling through it onto the road where you stand. The names are on the gate, and your name is in the hands of the one who engraved them. The construction is finished, the dwelling is complete, and the door for you has never once been locked. If that image of an open gate and a name already written stays with you after today, subscribe and walk through the rest of these threads with me. And in the comments, leave the word foundation if you felt, even for a moment, that you were standing inside the pattern instead of just reading about it.